Hello everyone, this is Ureh the Blender Magus, and welcome back to our modeling Anubis tutorial. So in this part we're going to start sculpting the general details to our base mesh here. And for the sculpting you can use a mouse, but I recommend the tablet. But just a heads up, you'll hear people say that you can't really sculpt with a mouse. I disagree with that wholeheartedly. Before I was able to afford a tablet, all of my sculpts were done with a mouse. So you can sculpt, and you can sculpt well with a mouse. It just might take a little bit longer. So what we're gonna do is we have our mesh here, and we're going to want to add a little bit of some more geometry in here before we get started sculpting. So first thing we're going to do is, with this selected, we're going to apply our mirror modifier on all of the objects that we have. And keep in mind, we're doing this to the base mesh group here, not the proxy mesh. So make sure that the proxy mesh stays off. And when I cut that off and I cut that back on, we have the same thing. And you want that because, again, we're going to use the proxy mesh for rigging and animation, and we're going to use the base mesh for creating the rest of the character. So what you want to do before you get started with your tablet is make sure that you have everything mapped out to the proper keyboard shortcuts. So what you want to do is you want to go to your tablet properties, and you want to go to mapping, and make sure you're in the pen. Alright, so usually I have this button where it says right click. I'll take that and I'll change it to a keyboard stroke, and it'll be a modifier key. And the key that I would like this to be on is the Alt key. It doesn't matter which one, but Alt is good. Okay. Next you want to go to your functions, where all these buttons are, and your functions might be different based off of the type of tablet that you have, but just make sure that you map particular buttons to some of the key strokes that you're going to be using a lot in sculpting. So the top modifier, it's already shift, so that's good. This modifier that's right underneath it is control, so that's also good. And then this modifier is pen and scroll, so that's fine too. But knowing that we've already set the mapping to Alt on this middle mouse button here, we're also gonna change this from double click to right click. Okay, now that we have that, when you hold what should be the Alt button that you've mapped, you should be able to rotate around your screen and pan around and everything with your tablet button. Okay, so now that you have that set up, we're going to get started. So to add some detail here, we're going to go to Add Modifier and then click Subdivision Surface. And we're just going to do that to the other things. But before we do that, just looking at our mesh here, I noticed that the thumb is actually rotated incorrectly. The thumb should be facing more towards you in the front view versus to the side of you. So what we're gonna do before we get going here is select this ring of vertices here and hit V to separate them. Right click, and then we're gonna just take this thumb here and we're just going to rotate it about 90 degrees, and that's R twice. Oh, I forgot to turn on my screencast keys. I apologize for that. Okay, good. They kept my settings from last time. Awesome. So yeah, just want to make sure that before you get started sculpting that everything else is already tight and ready to go. Because these changes will become more and more difficult to fix as the process goes on. So now that we've repositioned the thumb, you might want to smooth that, and gonna go here, hit Control E and bridge edge loops. There you go. And then we can take this ring here and hit X and click edge loops, and then we'll select these rings, hit G twice to edge slide them front and back. But yeah, that should be good. And then we're going to just bring it back in just to keep the proportions correct. Okay. Alright, so now that we have that, we're going to go back to our solid view, and what we're going to do is we're going to re-add the mirror modifier and delete it. So we're going to select the left or right side here and delete the vertices, go to modifier, add mirror modifier, and then apply it. So now the changes are on both sides. Now the next thing we need to do is go again and add a subdivision surface. So there we have it there. And then the only other thing we need to add a subdivision surface to is the head model. But before we do that, actually, because this character is going to be able to open and close its mouth, and if you wanted to do that successfully, we're going to have to we're going to select these these edges here and hit V to separate them, just like we did with the thumb. Now that they're separated, we're going to hit 3, go in the face select mode and select that ring of faces there. And with all of this selected, we're gonna left click, or if you're selecting is with left click, then right click your 3D cursor here, and you want to hit period to go to 3D cursor, and you want to R to rotate, and just rotate that mouth part down like this. Okay, then go back to edge select, select these two edges here, actually select these two here, and hit F to make a face. And then we are going to hit Control R, make these two faces here, and we're going to select this edge and hit F once, twice, 3, 4 times. Okay, so now we have a group of faces here. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to move this up. And we're just going to scale down the influence of... There we go. Alright. Yeah, so because dogs' bottom's jaws are actually thick, they look like they don't have much of a bottom jaw when they're looking down at you, because their mouth flaps kind of overlap their bottom lip. So select these two sides, bring them up. Okay, and then we're going to essentially do the same thing on the top that we did at the bottom. So we're going to select these 4, well, actually, because we already have these made here, we can extrude on the Z axis, and then select these two, hit F, select these two, and hit F. So now we've made faces that way, and it should be just as trivial to select these two and hit F once, F twice, F thrice, and 4 times. So there we have it. You want to just move these up just to keep with the shape. And when you move them up, make sure that you're moving them strictly on the Z axis to keep everything aligned in the center. Okay, now that that is settled, make sure you bring your pivot point back to the median point so that we can scale this properly. And now the next thing that we need to do is we're going to grab this whole section at the bottom here, SX, scale it in on the X axis, and then to help us with the teeth and such, we're just going to make an inset here. We're actually going to make a inset all the way up to here. So hit I for inset, and if your inset is insetting the faces individually, just make sure you go here and uncheck that box. So now that we have that, we're going to E to extrude that down, and then smooth it in a little bit, and make sure it's down more, and then SX, make sure it's down. Make sure it doesn't peek through any of the other parts of the model there, and there we go. And doing that has also given us an avenue to create the tongue. So we're just going to extrude out with this. Make sure you're in the side view and then wireframe, just so that you can see what's going on with that a bit better. I like to smooth it as I go. In fact, I'm just going to bring this one extrusion all the way up here and smooth it out as much as I can. And then we're going to add some edge loops in here, just to add some shape to the tongue. Okay. So now we have our tongue. Now we need to do, we're going to do the same thing for the top, essentially, that we did for the bottom. Okay. So now that we have that, we should be good to go for sculpting. And don't worry about the teeth and things like that. We're going to make the teeth and the like while we're sculpting, and then we'll go in and retopologize everything after the fact. Okay, so now that we have that, we're going to add the mirror modifier, or before we do that, actually, make sure we're going to actually duplicate the hands and the head. Shift D to duplicate those, and we're going to move those to the proxy mesh collection. In order to do that, just hit M on your keyboard and click the selection, and you'll do that. So now that we move those, we can apply the modifier here and then add it. We're actually going to leave the face alone. we'll add the detail with that as we sculpt. So now let's get started by fleshing out the details of the body. So we're going to apply this modifier, and then we're going to change our view from layout at the top here. We're going to change this to sculpting. So now that we're in our sculpting layout here, everything is basically set up for us in the sense that we already have our mirror modifier set up and our brushes are ready to go. And because of the way Blender 2.81 has its sculpting system set up, it's actually a lot easier to view where your cursor is, because the cursor moves along the surface of the mesh, and that just helps you plan out your details better. So what we're going to do is we're going to see where this says Dying Topo right here. We're going to check this box, and it's going to say vertex data detected. Don't worry about that, just click OK. Now we're going to go down here, and our detail size is at 12 pixels. What we want is our detail size around 8 for now, and we're going to click smooth shading. This just enables us to look at our mesh as it is when we'll be retopologizing it. So let's go in and get started. So it's good to have a general idea of anatomy before you start sculpting, but if you follow through with what I'm going to tell you, then you should be able to get the proper landmarks and stuff just fine without having to crack open a dozen books. Though it is good to have some reference images of the rib cage, the back muscles, things like that, and I'll actually pull some up as we're going, just if I need help with specific areas of the anatomy. But the part of anatomy that I am most comfortable with is the chest. So to start off the chest, make sure your strength and your radius both have your tablet thing on, so that it detects its pressure. Okay, and we're just going to sculpt the major forms of the chest muscles. And it's just a build-up, so don't worry about getting too detailed with your sculpt right now. Just as long as you get the general shapes of your muscles, that's the important part. So that's the only thing we need to be worrying about right now, is the general shape of everything. Okay. Okay. And there are different landmarks that you can note to yourself as you're going. So I don't remember the names of all the muscle groups that I sculpt, but I do know that the rib cage usually comes down to right about here. And on really skinny characters, it's really noticeable. But then the back muscles actually come from around, they loop around from the back toward the front. Or at least a couple of the back muscles do anyway. And these will be these muscles here. Then we have your trapezoid muscles, your trapezius muscles rather. And your trapezius muscles, they usually come all the way up from the back to the shoulder area. Again, don't worry about being 100% accurate right now. Just we're fleshing out the landmarks of the area. You know, we're not thinking about the major details or anything like that right now. We're just fleshing out the details. Okay. Just like so. And I'm actually going to bring those inward a little bit more. And so if you hit Control on your keyboard or your tablet, you'll invert the type of the type of direction that your brush is going. So right now under strength there's direction, and I have it under add. So if I had it on subtract and I held Control, I would be adding. But if I were just doing it regular, I'd be subtracting. So I usually have a default on add, and that depends on the type of brush you use. So different brushes, I would suggest having different defaults, just to make things a bit easier for you. And of course, holding shift is smooth, so you'll smooth out your sculpt when you hold shift. Okay, so let's continue to shape this up. If you've ever used Photoshop, the bracket keys actually increase and decrease the brush size in Blender just like they do in Photoshop, but you can also hold F and that'll decrease or increase the brush size for you. Okay, just gonna go there. And if we go back to our layout, you see the shoulder muscles on this character are pretty large, so we're going to accentuate those, but make sure if you jump out of sculpt mode and go back in, you have to cut back on dynamic topology or dyne topo, And actually, just to make life easier for us, I'm going to go ahead and open up. I'm going to go ahead and open up this image in the sculpting tab also, so that we can have it as a reference to look at. So again, the shoulder muscles are a little large on this character, so we're going to increase their size. In fact, we can use the inflate brush for this, so we're going to up the size of that, zoom out a little bit, and we're just gonna inflate this. You can smooth this out a little bit as well. Yeah, we definitely want these shoulder muscles to be a little plump. Okay, and we can actually do the same thing with the back muscles. We kind of want these inflated as well. Alright, and then we can inflate some of these up here with the chest muscle. Next, we're just gonna do a little bit of inflating for the arms here. So one thing to keep in mind while you're laying out the different forms, particularly for this area, the back muscles actually lay on top. Like if these arms were to be down, then you would see the back muscles going or slightly overlapping the your triceps. So just keep that in mind while you're working. That'll help with proportions and things like that. So we're actually going to hit G for grab, and we're just going to move some of these spots around for the proportions, just to get them more in line with what we're seeing in our image. Now keep in mind, this image on the, we'll just say the left hand side of the screen, the image on the left hand side of the screen, I tried to make it as anatomically correct as possible, but there are some, exaggerations for stylistic choices. So depending on how physically accurate you want your model, you really might want to go on ahead and find some other references just to help you sculpt the details. But we're not on the details right now. We are on just the general forms and shapes. So there's really not much else to be said for this part of the tutorial. We're really just alright, so we're gonna continue on. Sorry about that if you heard the train in the background. Sadly, there's not that many other places for me to record these tutorials these days, as I am not home. I am at school still. But when school is over and I get my own place, then the tutorials will be a lot more frequent and a lot more quiet, I promise. So, as we soldier on, we're just mapping out basic shapes here. We're not thinking about the details of it all or anything like that. We're really just worried about the shapes. What goes where, and how does it all connect? That's the main thing that we're worrying about right now. So I would go in depth with this whole thing, but again, there's really not much to say. I mean, you're finding the major forms of the object, and you're placing you're placing them on where you think they should go. So I'm going to time lapse the rest of me getting the major forms in. And if you have any questions, feel free to message me in the comment section below, and I'll answer you as quickly as I can. Again, I am at school, so it may take me a minute to get back to you, because I do watch YouTube quite a bit, but I don't check my messages like that. So I'm going to try to be more diligent about that for you guys. And yeah, so we'll be back after the time lapse.
What we do here is go back. What we do here is go back.
Alright guys, so we have finished the general detail of sculpting the body. So we have all of our general landmarks here. We have the pectoral muscles, the deltoids, the biceps, the triceps, the forearm muscles, the six-pack area, the obliques. We have our quadricep muscles, I think is what your quads. You got your calf muscles down here. Trapezius muscle, it goes all the way to the front, and then we have our clavicle muscles. Our clavicle muscle, or I think those are clavicle muscles with the clavicle bone. Yeah, we got a little bit of an indentation for the Adam's apple and everything else. So, and we also have our our back muscles, of course. So this is just the basic underlying of all the major forms of the body. You could take this basic part a little further, but this is really good for our purposes in this tutorial. I think I'm just going to do a little bit more for the back of the leg real quick, just to further lay out some more landmarks for the muscles. But we're pretty much finished with the basic detail here. So I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. Please like and subscribe to my channel, Ureh the Blender Magus, for more Blender tutorials and things like that. And in the next part, we're going to model the basic details for the hands and the head, and then we're going to attach both of those to this main sculpt so that they're all one mesh, and we can continue sculpting from there. So thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you next time. Have a good day.